think that's where we kind of mostly all agree, regardless of the party lines, about the access to this type of content to kids. But I need to look it up. But I thought, even though free speech is protected, I thought it kind of veers off when it starts to incite violence. And I think that some of the events that we saw this week, as we're going to start to see from some of the stuff that's going to come out, this was influenced by some of these people, that influencers or movements that are, they have, as Dr. Yvette Carnell said, dehumanizing speech. And there's these creators and movements that are kind of tiptoeing that line where it's protected, but it's still dangerous. It's still kind of riling people up. It's inciting anger. We need to be taking a closer look at that. And even though we're protecting free speech, we need to be holding people accountable for the types of speech that's negative, harmful, or it's encouraging, anger or violent actions.
I absolutely agree with that. And it goes back to what Ms. Pickett said, because I know of some middle schoolers who, when you're watching something and on your reel, you see a guy, he's having a speech and he gets shot. Like, there were kids who had access to this. They didn't mean to. It just pops up on your reel, right? And so now it's like, see, look how many people saw that video. Look how often people see videos like that. It's to the point where we are numb to it, and that's where, to me, and of course they tried to censor it because, it came in and blocked all the videos, but look how long that took, so to speak, right? I think that, just like you, I think that there has to be a limit when it starts to show divisiveness. I think at that point, and it's okay to have an honest conversation. I think that when we have honest conversations, if you see a problem and it's solution based, then I don't think that there's a problem with that, because you're genuinely trying to fix a problem, right? It's when it's not that way, when you're insulting people, or your whole point is belittle people, and that never ends well, and it doesn't end well in schools, because you'll find out most school shootings because somebody was bullied. And those people become adults. Maybe they didn't do anything in high school, but we know that everybody's not on the same playing field as far as their stability in their mind. We know that. Because if everybody was stable, we would have no homicides. There would be no killings, right? And I think I think somebody in the chat made a good point. I think that we kind of learned that early on. I think that that's the reason why we try to stay away from certain topics. I think that we go for safe topics. I think that we talk about women a lot because we don't want to talk about men, because you didn't talk about certain people, right? It's safer to do that. I think that you learn when you go to certain neighborhoods, you start talking about people, you might run and find out. We learned that at the early age. You talk about the wrong person, that's not new to our community. Maybe it doesn't happen in on a public platform, but you just don't go around popping off at the mouth. Period.
I agree. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead. You can. It's just.
Oh, okay. And I agree to an extent, because it has to be like clear guidelines when it comes to censorship. Because if we just say, okay, no negative language, well, when we start complaining about what we want changed in the community and how outraged we are, how upset, they like, well, that's negative language. You know what I'm saying? Because we can't, it's subjective or objective. Which one is it, y'all? Subjective. Yeah, when it's based on the person, subjective. Okay, yeah, it's subjective. You know what I mean? So I do agree to some extent. Like, I think that's where I get worried, because then when they start putting too much censorship because people are really that slow, then I'm like, now I'm censored, and I know I'm responsible with my words. You get what I'm saying? So I do understand why some people would be upset, but I do feel like when you, like what Shan said, when it comes to inciting violence, and hold on, it won't let me see the names at the bottom right now. Okay, Maroon Tiger. When he said inciting violence too, but when he said negative language, that's when I'm like, that's the part where I'm like, okay, I don't know. But I understand where y'all going. For kids, yes. But for adults, nah, I don't think, as far as negative language, it's gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna happen amongst adults. And I do think they should start creating platforms for children specifically, and then create platforms for adults specifically. Shoot, look, we might want to put something together, y'all. I don't think nobody thought of that yet. We need to put something like a kids Facebook or something. Go around to the schools, have all the PTOs pass them out to the schools. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that's where the real issue lies. Because then you have these kids being influenced by adults who think like them, and it's so influenced. It's so easy for kids to be influenced by immature adults. You know, I do agree with that.
I would even go to. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I'll make it quick. I mean, I get it. And like I said, I think we all agree on the influence and the impact on kids, but like kids weren't scaling the walls at the Capitol. Those were adults. And those were adults that were radicalized by free speech. That was probably borderline something that we should have, been holding accountable. So I think the real problem lies. I know our hearts are with the children, and we need to, shield that off and protect them from that, which is not being done today. But like the real area to improve is the adults that are that are really doing damage in society to people's mental health, to people's minds, to people physical security. Like the events that have happened this week, it's going to make things more dangerous for everybody, specifically certain groups.
You know why the position I take on that is I think sometimes we don't do a good enough job of observing human behavior. You ever wonder why there's only about 200 peace officers compared to thousands of inmates, or that you can be in a stadium full of 15 to 20,000 people and there may be 60, security guards? It's because most people are not violent by nature. The reason why hate groups and insidious things of like that nature are so polarizing is because the average person is not violent. The average person does not get into fights. The average person does not walk around with guns, don't know how to use them, don't have any desire to use them. I think that we sometimes get pulled into isolated incidents where you have one small group of individuals who get radicalized. But we're talking about 300 million plus people in America. Most people are not violent. Most people don't even even when there's violence, most people respond to the fact that it's such a visceral energy occurring that they pull their phones out. They may call the cops, but they're not getting involved because that's not most people's nature. So I think we can do both, but I think most of society, in my honest opinion, will be fine because the average person is not really concerned about taking matters into their own hands, like storming the Capitol or anything of that nature.
Can I say
I just want to add to that.
Wait, can I say something real quick? I agree with what you're saying, but the caveat to that is, you ever heard of like exposure therapy, right? So the more that you're exposed to those things, the less response you're going to have to it. So I think a lot of times I think that's what's happening in this environment, is that the continual exposure to the negativity and things like that is starting to become normalized, where the only way to make it not normal is to move to the extreme, right? And I think that's what's starting to happen, is that people are like going to the extreme with everything, right? And so I think that's part of the issue too. I do think kids should be protected in terms of things that they are seeing, because their brains are still developing. They don't really know how to decipher like real from fake. We're actually seeing that in school, like being able to identify fact from fiction, things like that, right? So that's why my push is making sure that, like, as adults, you do what you do. You're an adult, you make a decision, you deal with the consequences that come from that decision. Yeah, you have the freedom of speech, but there also comes the freedom of consequence, right? So as adults, you can deal with that. But as a child, you really don't have the mindset or reached a certain developmental stage to truly understand that. So in that way, they do need to be protected. But I also agree with you to the point that sometimes the negative exposure to them also helps teach them how to handle certain situations, right? So I remember like my grandparents and stuff growing up. I remember she was telling me a story about how they got called the N-word because they had to walk to school and the bus would, drive past with white kids, on it, yelling at them and stuff like that. So not that they should have had to have dealt with something like that, but I do think it taught them how to handle adversity. And I think in this generation too, the other issue we're having is that we're trying to remove all of the barriers that our kids are going to face because we don't want them to hurt. We don't want them to feel bad. And as a consequence, they don't learn how to deal with adversity. So then they grow up in situations like this and hear something that they don't like. And then it might be taken to the extreme, like what happened. So it's trying to find that balance.